Kia ora koutou, ko te tūmanako e ora pai ana koutou, kei te mihi ahau ki te mana whenua o tēnei wahi, ko te ahi paru kia ora. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Vinod Bal, pronouns he, him, and I'm from Aotearoa. Today I'll be presenting on Rainbow South Asians and human rights, and just an ongoing trigger warning. Themes like violence and suicidality will be present in my talk. Before I do so, it would be remiss of me to speak at a human rights conference and not mention that one of the most heinous violations of human rights in modern history is happening right now on the other side of the world. You know, no words that I can say will serve to highlight the abject horror of what is happening over there, but there are three things that I want to say on this point. First, civilian lives, Muslim and Palestinian, Jewish and Israeli, are sacred. Children's lives are sacred. LGBTQI plus lives are sacred, and they should be all spared from the strifes of war. Second, this sentiment also applies to the peoples of other genocides around the world that have not garnered as much media attention. Darfur, Xinjiang, Myanmar, South Sudan, Yemen, Ethiopia, Armenia, the list goes on. The mission of human rights demands that we are outraged in a consistent fashion when rights violations happen. And lastly, I also just want to say, contrary to popular culture, LGBTQI plus Palestinians do exist. They do. And we as a movement can't let the anti-LGBTQI policies of the governments justify their deaths. Benjamin Ferencz, one of the prosecutors who prosecuted the Nazi war crimes, and a man who's had a profound effect on my legal education, said, "Law, not war." And I think that's what we need to remember. Disclaimers. So, like many people in this room, I wear a couple of hats. But today, the hat that I'm wearing is as co-lead of Aotearoa. Second disclaimer, what I'm going to talk about could be taken to affirm this notion that South Asians or ethnic people are backwards. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about conservatism, ethnic views of queerness, etc., etc. Now, I don't want you to take this to mean or to affirm preconceived views that all ethnic people are backwards. Yeah, we as ethnic people, we're products of our upbringing. Yeah, we as Aotearoa, we focus on the negative so we can advocate for better. Yeah, we don't focus so we can chastise them. Okay, contents. So I'm going to be focusing on three things. I'll quickly run through who Aotearoa is, the report, and then concluding remarks. So about us, this is South Asia. It's 8 or 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, 8, I think. 8 countries in Asia, and Aotearoa works for equity for LGBTQI plus South Asians in Aotearoa who hail from here. But also in the motherland. So we do a little bit of work in India and Sri Lanka. That's a place that represents 8 countries, 1.85 billion people, 111 million rainbow people. Yeah, it's massive. But it's also a place of vast rainbow debate. As I said yesterday, India has been debating the issue of same-sex marriage in their Supreme Court. And in Afghanistan in the north, the Taliban are torturing queer people. Yeah, one Taliban judge said that a punishment for gay men having sex, well, there's 2 punishments. You can be stoned, or, and I quote, he has to stand behind a wall that falls on him. The wall must be 8 feet to 10 feet high. Yeah. So it's a place of vast and stark difference. One country is debating same-sex marriage, the others, the government of the other is torturing queer people. Now, like all organisations, we're only as good as the people that constitute us. Yeah, and here we all are at a street bagel here earlier this year. Chanel wasn't able to make it, so I photoshopped it, as you can tell, great. And a shout out to Sean, one of my wonderful, wonderful colleagues who spoke yesterday, about us. So we were the first South Asian specific organisation to be incorporated in January 2021. There we go. And we were started as a result of stories of inauthenticity. Yeah, gay men getting married to females, having kids, not back home in India, but here. Yeah, and those stories really tugged at the heartstrings of us who came together to make Adhikar Aotearoa happen. The goal is to try and reinstill the rights that our ancestors had to be rainbow without fear. Yeah. Now, I'll speak about the Indian context because that's the one that I'm sort of best aware of. But, in India, there were a vast variety of sexual and gender identities that are culturally contingent. Hijra is one that just comes to the top of my mind. And the British, through the British East India Company, came in sort of the mid-1600s. Through that process, introduced laws, and I think we all know about criminalising laws, but something really interesting that I think doesn't get enough attention, they also introduced purification campaigns of books. Yeah. So homoerotic texts were taken from Indian schools, were taken from Indian libraries and burned, yeah, to actually set the history on fire. Yeah. We have three key areas: education, support and advocacy. And as I said, we do domestic and a bit of international. And the reason we do a little bit of international is because of that number next to it. Now, if anyone's been to one of my talks before, they know what it represents. But does anyone want to take a guess? This is in the context of rainbow people worldwide, 83%. I'll give 7 seconds. Any guess? Just yell it out. 7, 3. All good. It's the amount of sexual minorities in the closet around the world. There's only 17% of us out. Rates of concealment are highest in Asia, Africa, Latin America? Yes. And they are the lowest, so most people are out in Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe, and North America. Yeah? So it's really important for us in these parts of the world where we have the liberty to speak for LGBT rights to do so. Yeah? Okay, now we're going to get onto the Adhikar report. So, in early 2022, as it says up there, we, Adhikar Aotearoa, embarked upon a community consultation process that sought to ascertain the experiences of LGBTQI+ or Rainbow South Asians in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We collected the stories of members of the community, and the stories were really telling. Yeah. And we're going to talk about some of the themes a bit soon, but we identified 3 macro themes, so 3 big level ones, and then 26 micro level. And I want to say a lesson that we learned. So we were very new to the world of research, Kāhui and myself. Next time we would rely more on numbers. Yeah. And I've talked to colleagues from Counting Ourselves, Kyle before, Jamie before, and next time we do it, really want to try and drive home the data, because that numbers is what government responds to. So if any of your groups are thinking of doing something similar, numbers. Yeah, this is a qualitative piece. It's a narrative, it's story. Key findings. So from the first macro theme, we had a couple of findings. So I'm not going to go through all of them because the report is available on our website. So if you're interested, give it a read. Give us feedback, more than open to critique. But I want to pick out a couple here. So violence. 44% of our respondents said that they had experienced violence as a result of their queer identity. Yeah. So this ranged from emotional and verbal violence all the way through to physical violence, whereby one of our respondents who came out gay to his Indian father was physically assaulted by said father and his uncle. Another theme that I want to touch on is the theme of preemptive distancing. And we were commissioned by Renews to write an article about this that came out on Sunday. So go into Renews and check it out. Now, this is something that we always knew existed, but really didn't have the language to explain it. And one of the respondents talked about sort of when he realized he was queer at the age of 11, he started to distance himself from his parents. And when I sort of queried as to why he did that, he did so because he thought that when he was going to come out to his parents, they were going to react badly. So in his words, he was preemptively distancing himself to mitigate losses. He eventually came out to his parents and it went all right. But sort of in the article that we published in Sunday and Breen News, we interviewed the person we were talking to, and he said, the relationship will never be the same because I lost out on these formative years of relationship building with the people who loved me, who were supposed to love me the most. Another macro theme was sort of ethnic communities and families. And again, I'll only pick up on a couple of these themes, but really conflation of rainbow identity with Westernism and South Asian exceptionalism. And this is something that my colleague Sean talked about yesterday. A fair few of our respondents said that, their ethnic communities, their parents, they believe that being rainbow is a white person thing. Yeah? Brown people, black people, we can't be queer. It's not a possibility. It was something that was atypical of our culture, which, as we know, is not correct. It is very typical of our culture to be queer. But they also sort of affirm this idea of South Asian exceptionalism. This was quite a new one. This idea that ethnic communities considered their children above being queer. Yeah? As if South Asian kids are wired somehow differently with a tradition, with a culture, to give us the ability to resist queerness. Yeah, that dastardly thing. Another one here, so marriage. So many of our respondents talked about how they were forced into heterosexual marriages to save face for the community, for their family. And there was one really terrible observation that one of the respondents made that really sticks with me, actually. And she said to me, and I quote, "You must remember that each time a person in such a relationship, particularly if they are a woman, has sex, they are doing so against every bone in their body." The reason I raise that is because I think it's incredibly important to understand the effects of being in such a relationship. Certainly these stories have been pervasive across the world, but when you dive deeper, you realize that the effect stems in many areas of the relationship. And then lastly, mainstream LGBTQI plus communities, and I'm going to talk about racism in depth a bit more, but xenophobia was a really interesting one, and really representing my privilege as someone who is South Asian but was born in Aotearoa. My family came here 106 years ago. Xenophobia wasn't something that I had really thought about that much until we did interviews. And so one of the respondents, who was Sri Lankan born, talked about the unique challenges that they faced being brown and being born overseas. Yeah, so they talked about how white queer people in the community would respond negatively to his Sri Lankan accent. Yeah, they would talk about how being born overseas meant that they didn't understand the queer culture or the queer mannerisms of Aotearoa. And what that meant is effectively they were denied access to queer spaces because they didn't have the same sort of the mannerism or the understanding of mannerisms or culture. And then queerness is whiteness, sort of this idea that white expressions of queerness are the only proper way to express queerness. Yeah, that the alcohol heavy, that the party laden white queer culture is a valid form of queer expression, but all others are not. Now, I want to just affirm two stories, and normally when I give this talk, I think this is my 12th talk on the Adigab report, 12th and last, I think. I zoom through 20 different stories, 20 different quotes, but I'm only going to focus on two today. And because, as I said, the report's available online. If you have any questions, send me an email. So I'm going to focus on two stories. One personal, and I will give you a content warning. It is not nice to listen to. It involves violence. It involves fear, being chased from your parents, chased away by your parents. And then one thematic. Yeah. Um, the details that I'm about to share come from the Adigard report, but not completely. Some of the details we kept to ourselves to speak about in settings like this. And the names that I use are pseudonyms, of course. So I'm going to tell you the story of Arfi. She is Afghani. She's in her early 20s, a bisexual, cisgender woman. Arfi left Afghanistan for New Zealand when she was 2 because her parents were being targeted by the Taliban. Growing up, Arfi knew that she was a bit different, but it wasn't until her mid-teens that she knew she was bisexual. Now, I've got a couple of quotes up on the screen. I'll give you the context of them. One day in June 2015, and I forget the actual date of the same-sex marriage case in the US, Arfi was watching TV with her father, a devout Muslim man, when a news item about Obergefell and Hodges, that's the same-sex marriage case in the US that legalized same-sex marriage in 2015, that appeared on the news. Yeah. In response, American queers were out on the street, out in front of the Supreme Court, kissing, flying flags, etc., etc. And upon seeing this, Arfi's father said, I don't know why they're celebrating now. They'll all burn later. Now, obviously, we can imagine the impacts of hearing our father say this. Yeah. And sort of when I was interviewing Arfi, she said to me, when I heard that at that moment, I thought to myself, does that mean I will burn too? Further in this interview, when I was asking about what would happen if her parents found out she was bisexual, she told me, and I quote again, I legitimately believe that my parents would threaten my life if they knew. They would think they are doing me a favour. Now, I just want us to reflect on the extent of prejudice in one's head to think that by killing you, they're doing you a favour. In one of my follow-up interviews with Arfi, she told me that things have taken a turn for the worst. So she had told her cousins that she was queer, she was bisexual, thinking that they would keep that secret. They told their parents told Arfi's parents. Arfi got a call from her older sibling and said that her parents knew she was bisexual. Arfi quickly went home, packed her bags with a few things, left home with a few belongings. Her sibling, said that her parents were going to send her to Afghanistan. I asked her why the parents were going to do this, and she said 2 things, and I don't think I'll ever forget the response. I'd have 2 options. First, I'd be forced to marry a man, then be raped by him. Second, I'd be killed. Arfi said that her parents were looking across town for her, but the last time I spoke with her, she said she's safe and her parents are no longer looking. When I tell people Arfi's story, they are always a bit shocked and saddened. And I want to put a pause on that shock because we intellectualize that stories like this happen in Kabul, Afghanistan. This happened 15 minutes down the road. Yeah? This is Auckland, New Zealand. The human rights that Arfi's stories engage are many. State of human rights for rainbow queer people in terms of security, right to life, safety, etc., etc. And I just wanted to sort of affirm this idea, more of a human rights thing, that it's typically considered that the human rights issues we face in Aotearoa are economic, social, or cultural, that the civil and political stuff is all gone. And while certainly I would suggest we're mostly free from excesses of the state in relation to civil and political rights, private citizens still harbour really, really dastardly views that can impact those rights. I'm sorry that I dampened the mood, but it's the reality. I'm going to talk about racism now, another cherry topic, and I'm going to talk about 3 types. The first is structural. This was a quote that was said by Kalia in her early 20s, Fijian Indian transgender woman. I feel that most South Asian queer people in Aotearoa aren't able to get access to that sort of money due to their parents not wanting to give money for transitioning, probably because of generational trauma. Whereas white queer people tend to be able to access that money, that sort of money, much easier in my experience, which makes them more acceptable to the LGBTQI plus community. So here, Kāhui is talking about how as a result of structural racism, and I would suggest particularly for recent immigrants, those recent immigrants, as a result of, as I said, structural racism, don't have the money to support their child's transition. I want to talk about interpersonal racism. Harry, late teens, Indian individual who's sexually and gender questioning, noted that racism is everywhere. The Pākehā rainbow community can be racist, especially the gays. And just a few comments about this. Because the racism is pernicious. It's certainly the explicit stuff, but it's more so the comments. It's the looks of disgust and disdain. It's the having to prove yourself in majority white queer spaces. What I think I've always said is that we ascribe a higher level of culpability to racism against us by white queer folk, because this is the exact community that says we are inclusive. Next one. Now this is relational racism. Racism that happens within dating or within relationships. And I wasn't going to focus on this, but a lot of the people in the community said that this was an issue. So, if we want to represent community need, of course, we need to talk about what they've talked about. So, Prem Kumar and Sundar, both in their late 30s, Indian gay cisgender men, said these things. Once I came out, I thought life would be better, but it is not. Life is hard, even within the queer community. We, as people of colour, have to push through to make space for us. They call it a preference within the gay community, but it is racism. Being a brown gay man caused me immense anxiety. When I came out, no one accepted me. I did not look like the rest within the gay community. Everyone else was white. I had suicidal thoughts. Another said, within the gay community, racism is hidden within the pretext of preferences. Even when they say, yes, I was a part of their fetishes due to the colour of my skin. Now again, this is something that I always say when I talk about relational racism, because I think this idea of preferences has really taken hold in our community. But let me be unequivocally clear. If you were saying that Indians, Sri Lankans, brown and black queer people, as a general statement, are unlovable, are unattractive, generally speaking, as I said, that's not a preference, it is racism. Yeah? Now I'm going to do something novel. I haven't done this in any of my presentations before, but given this is a human rights conference, I wanted to talk about human rights in relation to relational racism. Just quite a weird thing, because who you date is a choice. So I'm going to give you some context first. I just got back from a 4-month tour overseas doing a socio-legal research project on future LGBT rights. And I really want to meet to Supe from the Byron Foundation. Like Tane said this morning when you met with him at a coffee shop and chatted about that stuff, we also met and had a chat at a coffee shop. And I was just blown away by the kindness, the humility and the care you exhibited towards our community. And really, really am appreciative of the amazing opportunity that you helped fund. So thank you. So the context is this. As a part of this trip, I did a course at Leiden University on comparative sexual orientation and gender identity law that my excellent employers paid for, and that they enabled me the flexibility to do. The course was taught by Professor Kays Wildjoke. I'm just going to call him Kays. He's the world's only professor of sexual orientation law, who unfortunately is retiring in 2 years' time, which is a massive loss to the socio-legal queer community. So back in 2014, he conceptualized this right that he said was the right to relate. Yeah? And this right to relate has sort of been articulated as a part of the right to respect for private life in a variety of jurisdictions. The US, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights. And he defined the right to relate as the right to establish and develop relationships with other same-sex human beings. He said that there's a human desire, a human need, a human right, a social duty to relate. But the issue is when we're denied the ability to relate, to have those loving relationships or to have them recognized by the law. And he said that, there's a double bind. While society, and I quote, and law traditionally expect and require everyone to find someone to love, to relate to, and to live with, traditionally, society and law do not allow us to love, to relate, and to live with the person we love. That's the first bit. Second bit. When I was over there, I was hosted by this organisation called Land Illegal, and they were having their 50th anniversary, and I went. And in front of me that night, the chief legal advisor, who's lesbian, was embracing her wife. And sort of in my follow-up email, I wanted to convey how touched I was by that. I said, on a more personal note, I'm unsure if you realised, but I was standing behind you in Darina last night when you came over after you finished your stage. Without wanting to sound creepy, the love you and Darina shared is evident. The hugs, the kisses, the warm embrace indicated that to me. Part of the reason why I do what I do, and I'm sure part of the reason you do what you do, is so we can grow old together with the person or persons we love and hold their hands, and embrace them in public unabashedly. I'm still working on finding myself a man, lol. But once I do, I hopefully can share moments with him like you shared with Darina last night. Now, two very superficial and non-related observations. I'm still looking for a man. So if you know any eligible bachelors, send them my way. Secondly, upon reflection, that last night in the last sentence could sound a bit suspect, but I think she got what I was meaning. So, anyways, Kay's talks about this right to relate, etc., etc. And I think this email, in a really cheesy reflection, shows that there's a deep emotional attachment associated with this right to relate. Yeah? Or put another way, the right to find love unimpeded by legal or social barriers. Now, for us in Aotearoa, the law isn't an issue. Yeah, we got civil unions in 2004 as a result of the Law Commission report that recommended we do that. We got same-sex marriage in 2013 as a result of the efforts of many in this room. So what I'm suggesting here is that racism that sees South Asians as lesser partners, as more unattractive, as more unlovable than the rest of the community, that's actually a violation, a social violation or a social barrier of this right to relate. Yeah, it's not a legal issue, it's a cultural issue. And for the lawyers in the room, I'm not suggesting you can take a discrimination claim on this, don't worry. But I just wanted to highlight this. So, the Adhikar report is available on the website. It's the first publication looking specifically at the experiences of LGBT people of colour. And it was only possible because of the amazing participants who I'll forever be grateful to, and the really excellent funding that we got from the Royal Foundation and the Ministry of Ethnic Communities. Very, very quickly, because this is important, this is a paper written by Professor Thomas B. Stoddart. He died in the late he died a month before this paper was published, actually, and his colleagues at New York University finished it off for him. And he visited New Zealand, as it says there, in the April of 1996 to give a talk at the New Zealand Law Society's annual conference. And in this paper, he writes about how he was so excited to visit Aotearoa because it was a gay utopia on paper. Yeah, we had anti-discrimination legislation, we had equal age of consent, we had laws that decriminalise same-sex intimacy. And he said that here. That's basically what I just said. So, after a few days in Auckland, I had my answer. Auckland in 1996, from the point of view of a gay man, looked and felt very much like a large American city, Washington, D.C., perhaps, or Chicago or Los Angeles 20 years earlier. In short, New Zealand was not a utopia. It merely had the formal rules that ought to govern any utopia that includes lesbians and gay men. This realization, which hit me with greater and greater force during my stay in New Zealand, caused me consternation. Now, these are my concluding remarks. Human rights are obviously founded in pieces of legislation. They're founded in law. The law is incredibly important. But as these two stories that I've talked about just sort of before, to focus purely on the law means incomplete human rights advocacy. If I want to give one takeaway, it's this: have conversations. Because acts of human rights are founded in the conversations that you have with your parents, with your grandparents. As ethnic LGBTQI+ people, we need to engage in conversations with our parents, our grandparents, our religious and community leaders, etc. As Pākehā LGBTQA+ people, you need to engage in tough conversations with your community about racism against LGBTQI people of colour. To mitigate the stories like Harry's and Glenn Kumar's, we will do the same with our communities to mitigate the stories of Awhi's. Yeah. As LGBT people more generally, we need to speak with confidence and kindness and to reach out to build alliances with those who don't understand us and out of ignorance don't like us. These conversations, more than any act of parliament, more than any policy of any government department, more than any fund of philanthropy, although the fund isn't here, we will take your money as well, will contribute to the inoculation of a human rights culture that we need in Aotearoa for all of us to thrive. Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much.